All right, today we're going on a seriously mind-bending journey. We're going to completely deconstruct everything you think you know about the space around you. You probably think you have a pretty good handle on what reality looks like. But I promise you, by the end of this explainer, the plain, solid room you're sitting in right now, it's going to feel a lot less like something you're actually seeing and a whole lot more like something you were just told.
The universe is 13.8 billion years old, vast, ancient, and mostly invisible. And somewhere out there are answers to questions that keep scientists awake at night. Welcome to our channel, where we explore the darkest corners of the cosmos, the mysteries, the threats, the unknown. This is space like you've never seen it before.
So let's just dive right in with a question that might sound a little, well, absurd. Have you ever actually seen 3D space? Now, I know you feel perfectly confident in your three-dimensional world. Up, down, left, right, forward, back, it's all there, right? And maybe you spent your life looking for some mystical fourth direction and never found it. But here's the crazy catch. You haven't actually seen those first three dimensions either. Yeah, that's our first major twist. You don't actually see depth. You compute it. Think about it. Your retina, the back of your eye, is completely flat. It's exactly like a photograph. So that solid 3D world you are absolutely so certain of, it's essentially a hallucination. It's built quietly by your brain after the fact, stitched together out of flat 2D shadows. The seer always lives one step behind the world it sees. To really wrap our heads around this, think of Edwin Abbott's classic 1884 flatland analogy. Imagine a totally flat 2D being. They are completely blind to the concept of up. They're forced to infer 3D shapes purely from flat edges sliding past them. Well, that's exactly what you and I are doing. We are 3D beings totally blind to any fourth-dimensional direction, constantly inferring our 3D space from completely flat retinas. Biologically speaking, we are literally trapped inside a 3D illusion. But hey, if our eyes fail us, we can always rely on unyielding mathematical logic to build a higher dimension in our minds. It's actually a pretty simple progression. First, you drag a zero-dimensional point out to make a 1D line. Then, you drag that line perpendicularly to make a flat 2D square. Next, you drag the square straight up and boom, you've got a 3D cube. So to take the final step, you just drag that 3D cube perpendicularly into a brand new direction that our brains literally cannot picture. And when you do that, you make a 4D tesseract. And what's absolutely fascinating here is how pristine the math gets in the dark. Because even when our imagination totally gives out, the logic just marches on flawlessly. Every single time we drag a shape into a new dimension, the number of corners perfectly doubles. 2 for a line, 4 for a square, 8 for a cube, and exactly 16 corners for a tesseract. We don't even need to be able to picture the shape to know its absolute mathematical reality. Of course, to even talk about this fourth direction, we need some vocabulary. Enter the terms ana and kata. These were coined way back in 1888 by Charles Howard Hinton. And listen, these aren't just made-up fantasy words. They are placeholders for something incredibly real. They represent toward and away along that fourth axis. They're as genuine and real as up or down. Your body simply lacks the physical access to rotate toward them. So, what would actually happen if an object from Anara or Kahita passed right through our world? Honestly, it would look like a total glitch in reality. Real magic with zero mechanism. Imagine a 4D hypersphere dropping right through the middle of the room you're in. Because we can only see 3D slices of it at any given time, it would just appear out of empty air as a tiny point, swell up into a massive solid ball, shrink back down, and then vanish without a single trace. A tumbling 4D tesseract would literally look like a morphing, melting, causeless miracle. But wait, what if it wasn't just a tumbling object? What if it was a living, four-dimensional being? This is where things get deeply, weirdly personal. Because to a 4D entity, the whole concept of inside our world is just an illusion. They could see perfectly inside your locked safes. And way more terrifyingly, they could look completely unobstructed right into the chambers of your own chest. They could reach in and remove your appendix without making a single cut. They could even grab you, rotate you through anion kata, and flip your entire body into its exact mirror image. Think about that. Inside only exists because of the directions our skin just happens to block. Now, right about now, you might be asking yourself, okay, but is any of this actually real outside of pure geometry? Well, let's dive into the physics of it. Back in 1919, a physicist named Theodore Kaluza tried adding a fifth dimension to Einstein's equations of gravity. And when he did, the equations for electromagnetism magically popped out. It was incredible. But to explain why we don't actually see this fifth dimension flying around everywhere, Oscar Klein introduced this idea of compactification. Basically, it's the idea that these extra dimensions of space are curled up so incredibly tight upon themselves that they're just way too small for us to ever notice. So, how small is far too small? We're talking 10 to the negative 35 meters. That is a staggeringly tiny scale. To picture it, think of a long garden hose stretched across a lawn. From far away, it looks strictly like a one-dimensional line, right? Just pure length. But if you walk right up close to it, you see it actually has a second, circular dimension wrapped around it. At a microscopic scale, physicists believe extra dimensions are wrapped exactly like that around every single point of our universe. And this brings us directly to string theory. String theory actually requires not just one but 6 extra dimensions curled up everywhere, and they take the shape of something called a Calabi-Yau manifold. I actually want you to just look at the empty air in front of your face right now. String theory suggests that this so-called empty space is actually densely packed with these knotted, completely unseen 6-dimensional geometric gardens. And their precise folding? That dictates the very laws of physics we experience every single day. But here is the profound embarrassment of string theory, and it can be captured in just one massive number, 10 to the 500th power. There are that many mathematically possible ways to fold these hidden Calabi-Yau gardens. And out of that unfathomable ocean of possibilities, physicists have absolutely zero idea which specific one writes the physics of our own universe. It's a staggeringly beautiful theory, but it remains maddeningly out of reach. But what if we've been looking at this all wrong? What if the extra dimensions aren't impossibly tiny? Consider something called the hierarchy problem. You see, electromagnetism is incredibly strong. Think about it, a tiny little fridge magnet effortlessly defeats the entire planet's gravitational pull. Gravity, on the other hand, is mysteriously, absurdly weak by comparison. So in 1998, scientists proposed a wild new possibility. Maybe gravity isn't actually weak at all. Maybe it just appears weak to us because it's the only force bleeding out, literally diluting into a larger, extra-dimensional space that we just can't see. This idea leads us straight into a thrilling concept known as the brain world. Brain world theory suggests that our entire 3D universe is just a membrane, or a brain, floating inside a much larger, higher-dimensional bulk. We, along with all the light and matter we can interact with, are permanently glued to this sheet. But gravity can pass right through. And the consequence of that is completely mind-blowing. It means another entire physical universe could be hovering just a fraction of a millimeter away from your face, and it would be totally unreachable except through the faint whisper of gravity. Okay, let's ground us back in cold, hard scientific reality for a second. We have to look impartially at what experiments have actually found. Scientists have run torsion balance tests measuring gravity down to 50 microns just to see if it leaks. The Large Hadron Collider has smashed protons together at unimaginable speeds, searching for missing energy and microscopic black holes. And the result of all this exhausting work? No deviation, no missing energy. As it stands right now, there is absolutely zero direct experimental evidence that these extra dimensions actually exist. But even while the physics remains unproven, the pure mathematics of higher dimensions is absolute. And honestly, it holds one final, massive subversion for us. Let me ask you, does adding more dimensions mean you get more space? I want you to trust your gut intuition for a second. Naturally, you would think that climbing the dimensional ladder, stepping up into 4, 5, or 10 dimensions, would lead to these grander, larger halls with way more room to move around, right? Well, your intuition is completely wrong. If you track the volume of a sphere with a radius of 1, it does grow up to the 5th dimension, peaking at a volume of around 5.26. But look what happens when you push it to 10 dimensions. The volume plummets all the way down to 2.55. Past the 5th dimension, space literally hollows out. A high-dimensional sphere is terrifyingly empty in the center, with almost all of its volume crushed outward against an impossibly thin outer skin. So, mind-bendingly enough, more dimensions actually mean less space. Which brings us to the ultimate twist. Back in 1997, a physicist named Juan Maldacena discovered what's known as the holographic principle. He proved mathematically that the 3D physics of a volume of space can be perfectly, entirely encoded on its 2D boundary. This literally means that depth itself can emerge from a completely flat surface. Think about that. We've spent this entire explainer thinking an extra dimension was something we had to go looking for, out there in the dark. But it turns out the 3D depth we already live in might just be a holographic projection woven entirely from 2D data. It all leads us to this realization. The depth you already live in was the projection all along. You are standing inside the very thing you went looking for. And honestly, this brings us full circle right back to the retina. We are and always have been the flat creature inferring a solid reality from flat shadows. You don't need some magical portal to find a higher dimension. You just need to look at your own two hands and realize just how much of an absolute miracle it is that you can perceive their depth at all. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today, and I really hope this leaves you looking at the empty air around you just a little bit differently.
The universe doesn't care about us. It never did. But we care about it. And that is what makes us extraordinary. If this video made you think, hit like, share it, and subscribe to this channel. Because the next mystery is even deeper. Until then, stay curious.